All right, let's dive deep into Bitcoin. We'll unpack its origins, how it works, and what it could mean for the future of money. Our roadmap. An episode from the Decoding Bitcoin podcast.
It's really interesting that Bitcoin popped up in 2008, right during that global financial crisis.
Yeah, almost like a reaction to, people losing trust in the whole financial system.
Exactly. And then you have Satoshi Nakamoto releasing the Bitcoin white paper right when the world was reeling.
Feels like a pivotal moment, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Even the Genesis block mined on January 3rd, 2009, it mentions the financial crisis right there, like a symbol.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay, so let's talk about the tech behind it all. Blockchain, how would you explain that?
Imagine a massive digital ledger tracking every single Bitcoin transaction.
Okay, I'm following.
And this ledger, it's not in one place. It's spread across tons of computers. Super secure, totally transparent.
So it's like a public record of every Bitcoin transaction ever. Wow. How does that actually work?
So each transaction gets bundled into a block, and that block gets added to all the blocks before it, hence blockchain.
Ah, okay, makes sense.
And that chain keeps growing, creating this permanent record of Bitcoin's entire history.
But how are new Bitcoins actually made? I've heard of mining, but it sounds kind of mysterious.
Mining is basically verifying and adding those new blocks we talked about to the blockchain. It involves some hardcore math problems.
Oh, I see.
And the miners get rewarded with brand new Bitcoins for their effort.
Like a digital gold rush.
Yeah.
But the podcast mentioned there's a limit on Bitcoin, right?
Right. Only 21 million will ever exist. That built-in scarcity is a big part of why it's valuable, kind of like gold.
Interesting. So it's not just a tech thing, it's having real-world effects, especially in places with shaky economies.
Exactly. The podcast talked about Venezuela and Zimbabwe, where hyperinflation has wiped out people's savings.
Right. Bitcoin's more than just digital currency there.
Yeah, it's like a safety net against inflation. It holds its value better than their regular money.
And that idea of financial inclusion, that really hit home for me.
Imagine. People who don't even have bank accounts can suddenly be part of a global financial network.
It's a game changer. So what do economists think about Bitcoin's role in the bigger picture?
Well, they interviewed a cryptocurrency economist who said something fascinating. They described Bitcoin as like this unique asset that has the scarcity of gold, but with the speed of digital money.
So it's like digital gold you can send instantly. That's powerful. But what about the downsides? I hear it uses a ton of energy.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Mining does use a lot of power because of all those complex calculations.
It's kind of ironic. A system meant to disrupt things relies on such energy-intensive processes. Any solutions?
Well, there's a big push for using renewable energy for mining. Some operations already run on solar, wind, hydro.
That's good to hear.
And the hardware and algorithms are always getting better, more energy efficient.
So the energy thing is real, but people are working on it. But what about those crazy price swings? How can it be useful if the value is so unpredictable?
That's a hurdle for sure. The podcast mentions something called the Lightning Network. It runs on top of the main Bitcoin blockchain.
Lightning Network.
Think of it like a separate network for smaller, quicker transactions.
Gotcha.
Instantaneous payments, much lower fees, lets you do microtransactions that wouldn't make sense on the main Bitcoin system.
So even with the price going up and down, the Lightning Network makes everyday Bitcoin transactions smoother.
Right. And then there's the growing interest from big institutions. Companies like Tesla and Square have added Bitcoin to their assets.
Showing they believe in it long term. That's interesting. And El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, right?
They didn't move. The podcast had a clip of a citizen there who was like super empowered. Using Bitcoin, no bank needed, shows how it can give financial freedom to people who are shut out of traditional systems.
Amazing example of Bitcoin changing the game on a national level. What's next for Bitcoin? What's coming up in this story?
Who knows, right? It's impossible to say for sure, but there are some exciting things happening, like decentralized finance, or DeFi, and using AI with blockchain tech.
DeFi, that sounds like a whole other world. What are the key things for our listener?
Basically, DeFi is about recreating things like lending and borrowing money, but on a decentralized platform.
Cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. Banks become less important, makes financial services potentially more open, transparent, and efficient.
Wow. So it's about giving financial power back to the people. What about AI? How does that fit in?
Imagine AI running these decentralized systems, making things run smoother, even making investment
Our
choices.
possibilities are mind-blowing.
Right, and it's not just theory, it has practical implications for everyday life.
Yeah, how so?
DeFi could open up new ways to save, invest, even get loans without needing a bank. You could control your own financial data, make smarter decisions about your money.
This is incredible. We're talking about revolutionizing how we handle our finances. We've only just begun to explore this, haven't we?
Barely scratched the surface. Lots of unanswered questions and challenges, but the potential is huge.
This has been eye-opening. So what are the key takeaways for our listeners so far?
The big one is Bitcoin is way more than just digital money. It's changing how we think about trust and value.
It's about challenging the old ways and giving people new tools for financial freedom.
Exactly. The future is uncertain, but one thing's for sure. Bitcoin and blockchain are forces to be reckoned with.
Well said. So before we move on, any final thoughts for our listeners to ponder?
I'd ask them this. How will Bitcoin and blockchain change our relationship with trust and value in the long run?
That's a big one. It makes you think beyond the tech itself and look at the bigger picture, the impact on society.
Right. Will we stick with centralized institutions or embrace a decentralized future where trust is based on something different, something like cryptography and consensus?
It's a fundamental shift with the potential to change not just finance, but how we interact with each other, the world around us.
This is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation about the future of trust, value, the very fabric of our society.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this first part of our Bitcoin deep dive. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore the potential applications, the challenges, and the future of this revolutionary technology.
So yeah, it's fascinating to think about Bitcoin and blockchain changing how we think about trust and value. We've always relied on these big institutions, banks, governments, but now there's this alternative.
It is a bit like stepping into the unknown, isn't it? We're so used to the traditional ways. But with Bitcoin, trust isn't about who's in charge. It's about math. It's about everyone agreeing.
Yeah, exactly. A totally different way of looking at trust. But of course, it's not all smooth sailing. There are definitely some roadblocks along the way.
For sure. Like, what about regulations? It's still a bit of a wild west out there. No clear rules. Makes it tough for investors and businesses.
It's like trying to navigate a maze, but the walls keep moving. Governments are still figuring out what Bitcoin, even IS, legally speaking, how to classify it, regulate it.
Makes it hard for companies to operate, for people to feel secure about putting their money in. And this uncertainty kind of feeds into that whole debate, between the Bitcoin maximalists and the folks who want a more diverse crypto world.
Oh, yeah, that's a big divide in the crypto community. You've got the Bitcoin maximalists who think Bitcoin is the only real game in town. First one there, decentralized, limited supply.
They see it as the ultimate store of value, the basis for a whole new financial system.
Exactly. They say all these other cryptocurrencies are either pointless or just trying to copy Bitcoin without bringing anything new to the table.
And then there's the other side, the people who think there's room for lots of different cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, they argue that each crypto serves a different purpose, that competition is good, leads to more innovation. They'll point to, Ethereum, which enables these things called smart contracts and decentralized applications. Proof that there's space for everyone.
So it's kind of like, will Bitcoin stay king, or will we have this whole ecosystem of different cryptocurrencies?
That's the big question, isn't it? No crystal ball here, but it's definitely interesting to watch how it all plays out. But beyond all the philosophy and the investing, there's the question of what this stuff can actually do. How can it impact our lives in a real, tangible way?
Right, the practical applications. The podcast mentioned supply chains, how blockchain could really shake things up there.
Imagine tracking a product's entire journey, from factory to store shelf, everything recorded on a blockchain, permanent and unchangeable.
So consumers would know exactly where their stuff comes from if it's authentic.
Yeah, total transparency. And it's not just for physical products. Blockchain could verify digital stuff too, like artwork, music, even our digital identities.
That's wild. Could help with counterfeiting, copyright issues,
Okay.
make the whole digital marketplace more trustworthy. Didn't they also talk about blockchain for voting?
Yeah, voting, identity verification. Blockchain-based voting could be way more secure, transparent, no more hanging chads or whatever. And your digital ID, secure on a blockchain, could give you more control over your own data.
Sounds like something out of sci-fi. Tamper-proof elections, we control our own data. What other applications are out there?
I think the use of blockchain for charity is really interesting. Imagine tracking a donation all the way from the person who gave it to the person who receives it.
So you know the money's actually being used for what it's supposed to be used for.
Right. More transparency, accountability in the whole charity world. Donors could feel good knowing their money is actually making a difference. And that's just one example. There's so much potential here to solve real-world problems.
It's mind-blowing. We're talking about way more than just Bitcoin here. It's about rethinking trust, transparency, value across all sorts of industries.
Definitely. We're just scratching the surface. But it's clear that blockchain is here to stay. It's a game changer.
So as we wrap up this part, what's the one big message you want our listeners to walk away with?
Don't underestimate the power of blockchain. It can change our financial systems, how we interact, how we govern ourselves, how we build a fairer world.
It's not just about the tech, it's about the potential to build a better future. Okay, let's take a moment to process all this incredible information, and then we'll wrap up this exploration with some final thoughts. All right, welcome back to our Bitcoin deep dive. We've gone from its beginnings to how it could change industries, even society itself.
Quite a journey, right? We've covered how blockchain works, the hurdles Bitcoin faces, and what the future might hold.
So as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as they navigate this whole new world?
I think the biggest thing is understanding Bitcoin and blockchain isn't just for techies anymore. It's becoming important for everyone.
Yeah, it really is. Whether it's the future of money, knowing where our products come from, or just like how we trust things in this digital age, it's all connected.
And it's only going to get more important. So staying informed is key. Keep learning, look at different viewpoints, figure out what you think about all of this.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Got to stay ahead of the curve, especially in a field that's changing so fast. But I think it's also important to think beyond the tech itself, the bigger picture.
Absolutely. This stuff could really shake things up. Power could shift from those big institutions to individuals. That's huge.
Makes you think about privacy, security, even how we govern ourselves in a world where things are less centralized. Big questions to consider.
And there's no easy answer. It's a conversation that's happening right now. It's evolving, and that's what makes it so exciting. We're all shaping the future of this technology.
So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on. In a world that's more and more driven by technology, how do we make sure these advances are good for humanity? How do we make sure they empower people and create a more just world?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think the answer lies in, well, in all of us. Being open-minded, talking to each other, and using these tools for good.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Bitcoin. We hope you've learned a lot, and maybe you're even a little bit excited about the potential of blockchain technology. Until next time, stay curious.